Hey everyone, I'm Rushlock. This is a blog post by Dinkle going over the whole uh, New Dawn updates and pending mining changes and things like that. So we're going to go over this as briefly as possible. Dunk even starts it off with saying they spent a lot of hours on the test server and gave some perspective on the changes. And they even start off with a TLDR for us. So let's get right into it. Opportunity exists for more resources to hit the economy, but it creates negative effects. So this is kind of, it's a TLDR, so it has to stay kind of non-detailed, right? Um, with the doubling of ore on grid and other changes along those lines, there's more stuff out there that create negative effects. As we go through this, we'll expand upon them, but I presume they mean like you have to make more clicks to get to it, right? And nerds are going to be all about more effort for the amount of effort being increased doesn't scale well from their perspective to the increase in gains of material. Dunk also says increased time effort, here we go, of resource gathering runs counter to making resources, quote unquote, less scarce. It does in a way, so like this is kind of like pedantic or semantics here. It's like CCP said, scarcity is over, prosperity is starting. A decrease in scarcity is literally putting more stuff on grid, right? Putting more things out there. So in that perspective, they've checked the mark, but it doesn't factor in that players will have to invest more time and efforts to see that gain, which is obviously going to be an intended goal by CCP, even if unpopular. And as we go through this in greater detail, we'll be coming back to that idea, several times. The basic ISK an hour metric for most players in resource gathering appears to be going down. Yes, op success, mission achieved. That is exactly what CCP wants to do. They've been very vocal about that for the last couple of years. This is a very water is wet statement. I don't mean that it was lazy of Dunk to make it. Like it's important for the, I guess, give affirmation to the reader. Like, do you feel like you're making less ISK per hour? It's because you are. And that's going to continue. That's been a stated mission goal from CCP for the last couple of years. It doesn't mean that, we should celebrate it by any means, but it's definitely intentional. Mix of good changes are included alongside the highly controversial nerfs. True, absolutely agree. So there are some good parts of the update and proposed changes, but they'll be completely drowned out by screechy and titled, where's my pre-scarcity earnings, coming back in the Age of Prosperity. Mad Boys, like that. It's like anyone who's upset about Rourke and Orca solo mining getting, dunked, for lack of a better phrase and pun intended, they've lived under a rock for years, which, they were AFK mining, so of course they were. The AFK mining is more of an Orca thing, of course. The Rourke was more of an ISK printer, not less an ISK printer, a resource printer. But the point is, it was low effort, right? You invested a lot of in-game resources so that you can go AFK and not really have to make any clicks. You'd pay attention to intel, have awareness, be under a cap umbrella, have the right fit, follow directions from your org that you're in, and you were pretty much just, printing resources at will. It was low effort, high reward, and when something like that, the low effort, high reward, exists in a game state, not for a week or two, like the little bug patches that happen in most MMOs, but when it happens for a decade, it is really easy and understandable for people to settle into, this will have negative connotation, but an entitled position. They feel like this is the norm, this was intended, and it was. Don't think for a second that this wasn't of CCP's making, years ago to extract some cash out of its user base to get them excited about a highly, highly effective resource gathering tool. But it's like CCP shot themselves in the foot a decade ago and are just now taking the bullet out. And they're like, oh, we should probably address that wound. This is exactly what we're seeing here. Players have gotten into a very comfortable position where they feel like they've invested a lot of in-game resources and time with, via skill training or credit card swiping, whichever way they decided to get to that point. But that part's irrelevant. The important part is they feel like they achieved a pinnacle and they can go into farm status, and it was great to them at the time. And though it took way too long to do it, CCP finally, made their way to this particular faucet and decided to tighten it up and then botch communication. Because with all the sheer quantity of people who obviously believed that Age of Prosperity or the end of scarcity would be leading to pre-scarcity faucet levels is mind-blowing. Not that people could be that, unaware, I guess, but the fact that people were that unaware because there was a lack of pointed, direct communication from CCP saying, here, the FOSSes are beyond out of control, and we're going to tighten all of them, and this is the direction we're going. It's been mentioned, right? It's been alluded to or skirted for these past 2 years, but they needed to hear it more often. They being the intended player base or intended targets of these nerfs, and that's probably where the lack of preparation came from. Like, if you're hearing about these mining changes in the last week or two, and you were unaware of it even being a possibility for the last 2 years, it's hard to feel sympathy for them when you were that willfully blind and ignorant and tone deaf to anything going on around you. That won't be popular to hear. We'll get a lot of dislikes for saying it, but it's the truth. Take responsibility for your own ignorance. It was a bad game state. It should never have existed. But it felt good, right? It felt good. And Dunk's going to go into that later in the dev blog the blog post about, like, Eve should feel good to play. And it did. People felt really good. Except that sometimes when that high, that feeling really good about something happens, someone has to be objective and be like, but is this sustainable? Is it healthy? And in this case, it wasn't. And it wasn't for a very long time. And that length of time is what it normalized it, right? When you normalize an unhealthy game state, that's how you create, like, this perception that it's fine. It's okay, right? They're going to do something to fix things and give us a big sink at the end of the tenure of bad game state, and it'll help itself out. And we'll still have our nice shiny toy to play with, and so we'll be able to afford putting into that sink. But, all right, TLDR, talking about the mix of changes. These changes will not make the average player feel a new age prosperity. We kind of discussed it already. And this is what Dunk leads right into. Am I having fun, or find the playstyle I enjoy rewarding? So this is like about mining. It's correct in that, like, did I get things done? But I don't think anyone would ever describe mining in Eve in any capacity as fun, engaging, active gameplay. Other than maybe like gas harvesting, when you go diving with the Venture or whatever, which they've nerfed that as well for whatever reason. Dunk touches on that later on the post as well. He says, in my opinion, if Eve does not feel rewarding, it is failing to achieve its purpose. Absolutely agree. I don't think anyone was having fun Orca mining AFK or Orc mining semi-AFK. Like, I don't think there was a fun, active... I don't know. Like, maybe this is debatable. I just don't associate fun with inactive gathering, right? Like, it's just a little program you run off on the side while you're doing something else and having fun somewhere else, but you're still being productive, right? Maybe the sense of productivity, feeling accomplished, or I got something done is the fun here. But it's been argued that CSP needs these changes to put in handles to be able to adjust the game economy as needed, and these are necessary pains. True. Like, it's been argued because it's reality. Like, it goes back to the CSP communicating about this for the last 2 years. Like, tighten the belts. Things got out of control, and we're just now getting to be able to fix it because we weren't in a position to be able to do so before. There are reasons for that. It's a whole other video, I'm sure. So I'm trying to get through Dunk's post as quickly as I can. So let's stay on task here. Here's an allegory. He talks about the story of boiling frogs, that you slowly increase the temperature so they don't notice it. Where CSP just boil the water first, chuck the frogs in. Frogs were like, "Yeep, it's hot," and CSP was like, "All right, cool, we'll handle that for you," and then waited way too long to do anything about it. It applies, right? But it still goes back to the idea of, like, why are we killing frogs in the first place? Like, why is harming the player base or being perceived as harming the player base even an objective? But anyway, the allegory works. If you read it in the post, it'll make sense to you. Resource doubling. This is the kind of the hook that CSP is hanging their hat on with announcing these changes. Is like, guys, we're going to put twice as many resources on grids for you. Isn't that great? Isn't that prosperous? And Dunk touches on, like, that doesn't mean scarcity is over. It kind of does. It really does. If there's more stuff out on the field, there is more plentifulness. There's more opportunity or more resources to gather. But Dunk is also correct in that with the waste mechanics, it's at least half negated, if not more. And we'll get into that more as we go on. Yeah, however, the waste and loss compression need to reduce the overall resource significantly. We've gone to the PI needs. Be honest, I'm not aware enough of PI. It's like a pyramid structure of, like, resources getting crunched in for your different levels for P1 and beyond. So the thing that stood out to me, though, was they're talking about, like, capital ships, bringing prices down. Like, why is this a goal? Why, perspective is huge, right? When you play E for years and years and years and years, and you have everything, and you're around people who have most things, perspective gets changed dramatically. I'm not saying capitals should only rise, but I don't see it as a mission goal for like, oh, we need to get capital ships to be more accessible. Capital ships should be a pinnacle, right? It should be something you're doing when you're quote unquote at endgame. Eve doesn't really have a linear progression thing, so people use ship trees as kind of like a check mark, a benchmark to see where they are in their Eve career. But folks in a large block with lots of pilots and objectives and sovereign to manage and hold definitely want their cap ships to be more accessible, and that's where personal agenda, not like Dunk as a one person is the only person doing this, but like organization agenda, like we need more caps because other people have more caps. Well, the problem is there's too many bleeping caps. It isn't that they're not cheap enough; it's that there's too many already because the proliferation has been happening for the last decade plus. How CCP can address that, I have no idea. I don't think that making capitals more accessible is the answer. But I also don't know how CCP can fix the already existent thing outside of they'd have to create conflict drivers, but they've been trying that for a while, wildly unsuccessfully in terms of getting more things to blow up. And that's another reason I think why we're seeing such a heavy hand on resource crunch, because things are not blowing up. And that extra crunch is needed to offset the lack of things blowing up in game. So industrial subcapital holds. This is one of the examples Dunk talks about, like, hey, this is a good change. It made it in. No one's going to care because everyone's freaking out about the things that they don't like. Compression changes, excuse me. So this is very, very good, like, in terms of like how Dunk explains it. It's like a good intention but poor execution. It's overly complicated. That's the big thing that I definitely agree with Dunk on this part. Like, it's just overly complicated, and it just punishes you. Like, you sit out in space, whether you're tethered or in a POS or whatever, like, it's just clunky. I'm going to sit here for hours to min-max compression yields. And the alternative is checking into an Athanor and compressing it that way, and then getting a higher waste ratio because of that, and then having to decide which one's worth more or less. Is it worth sitting out here and crunching the ore manually, or should I just chuck it in the structure and let it handle it? I think time and math will tell. There's definitely a human element to it. Like, who's going to sit in their newly nerfed Rourke and crunch ore? Like, are they going to do it for the team? Maybe. Are they going to do it for the team in the short term, and then long term you're like, this is miserable? Also probably true. I think Dunk goes into a detail here. Yeah, here we go. So for the Orca, there are 28 different modules to compress ore. For the Rourke, there are 38. Like, there are probably technical reasons for this, but I can't fathom why this isn't also mirroring the crystal system, where they're changing the ore to be designated by rarity, with common, uncommon, rare, and so on. Like, why that wasn't done with modules and compression, I have no idea. I definitely assume it has to do with tech limits, and maybe they wanted to do that, just didn't have the time to implement it. Hopefully that happens in the future, because yeah, this is insane to have to coordinate and fit up multiple oracles to crunch or compress rather the ore coming in. It's just layers bad, multiple layers of bad interaction from the user side. It's a bit short term because like the user for the Rourke will already be quote unquote feeling bad from the nerf, and you tell them to sit out in space and do a multi-layer ore crunching, and it's like, I hate this. Like, I hate everything about it. But they're doing it for the team because they don't want to chuck it in the Athanor and lose efficiency and things like that. So hopefully that gets looked at. Maybe that'll be the big focus for feedback. Dunk's going to get into that too later on in the post. Moving on to mining waste. This is a huge thing, right? Mining waste is not a bad idea, says Dunk, but the end result is counterproductive to getting lower SP players involved with mining and getting more people in space. We've had, people in stream chat talk about this too and make it as their kind of like, here's the hill, we're going to hold this line and plant our flags. It's easy to agree with. How about that? Maybe that's a more diplomatic way of approaching it. It's easy to agree with. Mining, waste on its own is not a bad idea, but it's counterproductive to getting low SP players involved with mining. There's a little bit of a contradiction here. Like, Dunk will later on in this post talk about like taking out his solo miner for 45 minutes on a belt and then docking back up, and his court mates aren't going to be mad at him because he's not out there chewing up very valuable moon ores and creating waste there, and which is actually true. I don't know where the idea comes from that Tech 1 mining module users should be on null moons, or any moons for that purpose. Like, I don't understand where that comes from. It's like, well, it's pushing away new miners. Yeah, it's putting new miners where they should be, off a moon and onto a belt. And then if you're going to stick with mining, there's a heavy push from CCP that you need to get into Tech 2. And that seems fine to me. Like, where else in EVE do you quote-unquote master an activity in your Tech 1 modules? Maybe nowhere, really, right? Because even in, like, low-sec PvP, you need to slam into T2 weapons as quick as possible. You need that T2 tank. It's a drastic, huge buff to do so. And the same thing with mining. Like, why is Tech 1 mining suddenly sacred? I don't understand. I don't know. Maybe you can put something in the comments, as you're watching this. If you guys have ideas, please feel free to do so. I don't understand the sanctity of Tech 1 module mining. It doesn't make any sense to me. Low SP Tech 1 mining users have a place to be. It isn't the more valuable locations. That makes perfect sense to me. I don't know how people are screwing that up. E-players are min-maxers, and the proposed design leads to a natural path to basically exclude as much waste behavior as possible. True. So whenever, I don't know if there can be notifications. I hope there are. Oh, there's the waste right there. Perfect. So, like, that pop-up right there, you wasted, and wasted, 5k units. That's a push from CCP monetization. They want you to quote-unquote feel bad. Dunk talks about dopamine levels earlier at the beginning of that TLDR, like, is E fun? Is it creating the dopamine hits that I need to continue playing? And for whatever reason, CCP went in the opposite direction and was like, we're just going to punch our player, lightly to kind of prod them into the behavior, the economic or fiscal behavior, consumer behavior that we want, which is, creating urgency. Oh God, I'm wasting ore. I need to do something about that. What can I do? I need to train in Tech 2 modules. Okay, awesome. That's going to take how long? Okay, I should probably put some ISK into skill injectors. Okay, well, where do I get ISK from? Okay, well, I can't make it quickly, but there's urgency here, so I'll just go ahead and buy Plex, sell it, convert it into SP, and bam, now I'm a good boy. I'm not wasting ore out here anymore. That's the overall intent. There's definitely room for debate on is that good, bad, healthy, ethical, whatever. People have different opinions about that, and it's fine. But that's the intended goal. I don't think it was anything like a mistake, but that's what was going after. This means that rich get richer and the poor get kicked from the mining fleets. That's only if you're in a bad organization, though. Like, a good organization is going to take their players and put them where they need to be and give them infrastructure and plans and options to succeed. They're not going to kick them from the mining fleet and just tell them to F off, right? Like, that's just a bad organization doing it. Let's see. As Tech 1 modules low SP players use simply waste too much of the valuable rocks. That's easy. They shouldn't be there. Believe it or not, you don't have to have every player in your op on the same grid at the same time. If you think that you do, then you've been living the last 10 years of, like, how do we crab and never get, any risk coming our way. Let's see. Yeah, this talks about mining drones and, like, they're boo-hoo. Like, who cares about mining drones? It doesn't matter. Like, it's automated gathering. That's what CCP's after. They've been talking about that for years. This is not a shock or a surprise. The idea of offensive waste mining fleets is raised, but it seems fairly unrealistic. We are going to see this becoming a common tactic. Mining ships are so paper thin that this kind of fleet would become a meme fleet that's instead of a serious economic attack. I absolutely agree. I think it would be awesome and a lot of fun to see options. Maybe we haven't seen enough of the high waste. I view it as like a blitz attack. You want to fill them into enemy space or hostile space. You want to hit as much, want to waste as much moon ore as possible, and then get out. Well, not get out, but you'll get whelped, which is fine as long as you waste more value than It goes back to the min-maxing, right? Like, let's show the kill board. Let's look at the mining ledger. We wasted X million ore and lost X million in ships or billions and whatever. It could be used to chokehold people. It'd be an interesting idea if it ever came to be a thing. I don't think it'll happen with the current setup, but maybe that can be developed and polished later on. The entire waste paradigm needs to be flipped in some way so that the rich and high SP players can't simply get more ability to dominate resource gathering. Isn't that the point of having, ISK and more SP than other people? And dominate. Dominate over who? Your allies? Like, then set your allies up in environments where they can succeed. Put them on the lower value targets until their skills train. Like, if they're just sitting at Tech 1 and not moving, what's the point of them then, right? Again, an opportunity to create variable ration variable reward mechanisms is something that should be considered. I agree. Somewhere else in this post, Dunk also talks about this idea. Having a chance for a lucky waste roll to pop out something valuable would do a lot to soften player resistance. Absolutely. He gives another example in this post somewhere about how, like, imagine your cycle comes around and it's like not only waste, but also, hey, you're hitting, Veldspar and some extra, go up a couple rarities and ore types. A chunk of that came out of it, or a module fell out of it, or whatever it could be. Like having some kind of RNG perk reward pop up every once in a while. Could do exactly what he said, soften player resistance. Like, oh, okay, suddenly there's good RNG instead of just bad RNG, right? Let's see, combining lossy compression, lossy compression and waste in the mining general case gives the example from like 2-2 module mining and then go for Athenor compression. Easily turns 100% increase on resources on grid to maybe a 50% actual increase in resources. True. Like, that's just, I'll be interested to see more math as this goes on, in more details in different scenarios, but what they're describing here sounds accurate and desirable from CCP's perspective. The issue is that players didn't expect that, right? Players wanted to go pre-scarcity income faucets, and that isn't happening, and this is showing that. This doesn't consider the additional changes in mining ships that realistically increase the amount of time spent in the act of mining, lowering the ISK per hour. Yes. That goes back to like how most players will be, seeing a decrease in ISK per hour. That is true. That is intentional. That was the point. That's what CCP was aiming for, even if they didn't heavy-handedly enough communicate it, in my opinion. Mining ship changes. As has been hinted previously, the Porpoise, Orca, and the Mork are not going to be mining ships going forward. And that's the issue, right? It was hinted at previously. It was never stated, by CCP that I'm aware of, at least not in a loud and consistent enough effort to make that come to be common knowledge, right? And that lack of communication created an environment of ignorance, and that created backlash for, wait, where's my cool stuff going? He talks about the gas bonus from the venture being removed. Can't figure out why. Agreed. Like, what was the venture doing to the gas market? We're obviously oblivious. Like, maybe CCP knows something we don't, or it just got swept up in a bunch of changes that were already happening. The more I look at the less I get a clear picture of what is trying to be achieved, other than don't mind so much stuff, which seems counter to the theme of New Dawn. This is another communication mismanagement, right? Like, CCP came out with like this. It's a new dawn. It's the age of prosperity coming after the age of scarcity. They overplayed it. They oversold it. Maybe this is a case of marketing and developers not communicating internally well enough. Maybe it's bad timing. Maybe this stuff was meant to be in the game sooner and it wasn't. But like, hey, we're in the quadrant. We need to be updating to the next benchmark for narrative. Not like just lower in-game narrative, but like marketing and sales narrative. And tough. Like, we're going in. And Dunk says at the beginning of this thing in TLDR, like, overall there is an uptick in resources available, but there's there's several negative aspects to it that hopefully we'll get most of them addressed. Not all of them. Some of them are that quote unquote necessary evil, but it's only evil from the perspective of people who were, because like it's not like their fault. I guess anyone who has been Rourke mining for the last 10 years and thinks it was a healthy game state, like, they're just ignorant. But anyone who feels bad about the Rourke getting nerfed, like, that's understandable, I would think. That goes back on the CCP's plate for not having communicated properly. Condensing reprocessing skills and mining crystals. This is actually a really good part. Dunk talks about it favorably and positively. I would like to see this system carried over to the reprocessing. The condensing part of it. We talked about that with the modules earlier, how there's like 28 for the Orc and 38 for the Orc. Like, that's insane. Like, use the same system you have for the crystals for rarity based. Like, hopefully it happens eventually, but we'll see. So what's next? I think the dev team is taking the community reaction seriously and trying to listen to the concerns. This is a good thing. We have their attention. Also, temper expectations. Like, CCP will look at feedback. They'll do what they can. But if you think they're going to walk back the change, you're out of your mind. And I think there's room for them to make changes. Like, I always felt strange about the triple waste layering. Like, you have waste when you're mining, you have waste when you're compressing, and you have waste again when you reprocess. Like, why does it need to be 3 stages like that? Just up the reprocessing loss, right? But they have to have some reason for it. Well, probably to create a false or a pseudo need for the industrial ships that is nerfed, I guess. The ball is in their court, and says CS players take a look into how Denizens of Eden would use or abuse the current design. Personally, I was hoping for more information on the mention last July about rework of the industrial index, including greater choice over the distribution of resources, which is important to my group. But we need to get through New Dawn first. Dunk says, my ask of the dev team is to remember that players want to enjoy EVE and feel rewarded for their effort. If that gets lost, nothing else really matters. Absolutely true. They've, for whatever reason, layered several negative, impactful interactions in interacting with the contents, and even though it probably isn't the only solution, like Dunk gives a good example of something that could be done with that RNG proc of like, hey, every so often, and maybe your chance to have those interactions goes up with your skill levels of a certain skill. I don't know. I'm not saying they should add like a luck skill to the game, but like, with higher level mining skills of whatever type, like you have a chance to proc a random reward for it. Like that would help a lot with the whole it's negative interaction without any positive. Let's see. And then Dunk closes and talks about like, there's a lot more deep diving that you can do in the min mathing, but your brain will just break. His certainly will. He says, I agree. Like, I'm waiting for smarter nerds than I to crunch numbers out and actually give actual good data. And then I'm waiting for more nerds to do it, because if you just base all your assessments off of one person's data post, then you're putting a lot of faith in that person. But yeah, that's our breakdown of the Dunk Dinkle blog post. I definitely intended this video to be about like a third the length that it currently is. So thank you for sticking around. If you have feedback, comments, questions, put them in the comments down below. I'll put a link to Dunk's post here in the description of the video, so you can go check it out for yourself. But enjoy your day, be safe, and we'll see you next time.